Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday Conversation. Last week, Alan said he had to go out of town, and he says, will you do the talk for me on Sunday? I'm like, no. Why would I do it? Have Chuck do it. He's like, I think you would be good. Do it. And I'm like, nah. So I forgot all about it. And then yesterday, he's like, Jan, I really want you to do the talk. Well, I had to think about it for a little while because I'm not one of Roy's kids. I'm not in the foundation. And there's a little bit of wondering, why should I be doing it? But then there's also, you need to do your part.
But you're a seeker.
Yes, I am a seeker. But here's why I don't like talking. I'm also a crier. I'm a crier. And so I don't like to do that, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to cry sometimes. When I seek and listen to people, I love to hear personal testimonies. That's my favorite thing. I hear people all the time, and it just has so much meaning and life to it because they're not just regurgitating someone else, right? So I thought I would share a little bit of my testimony today, which is a little hard. But it's only hard because I was made to doubt myself growing up. And it happens when you're very young. Very young. I grew up in a family with 5 kids. I love all my brothers and sisters, and I love my parents. But along the way, there's dysfunction in everybody's family. I'm sure everybody can identify with something in their childhood. So I'll just say, made to doubt, ridiculed. And I remember driving here that one of Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals is to use ridicule. It says, and I'm going to read it right here. It says, number 5, ridicule is man's most potent weapon. There is no defense. It's irrational. It's infuriating. It also works as a key pressure point to force the enemy into concessions. When I read that years ago, I was amazed that they would even identify that as a tool, because that is what they do. How do you defend against it, right? Unless you're, already a very balanced person. But especially as a child, that's bullying, that's just what it is, and you don't know what to do with it. And if you don't have a very strong sense of who you are, which comes out of how you are in your family and how stable your family is, then you're going to be very open to being subject to that. So along the way, it penetrated me. It made me doubt myself, who I was, my value. And so inside you begin to wonder why. What's the answer? What's the truth about all this? So interestingly, I remember one day as a child just thinking, what is all this about? Why is this like this? And something kind of just said, you'll figure it out when you're older. Or you'll know later on. I could kind of see later on. And I just thought, okay. And I just kept living my life. And when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, it was my birthday, and I was given this light blue radio that would sit on your dresser or something, right? And I just thought it was the neatest present. I don't know why. I felt like it was an adult thing to have a radio, right? And I just loved it. And I kept it for years and years and years and had it next to my bed. Well, then after I graduated, in the summer, I was 18 years old, came home late after midnight from a party with some friends, and started getting ready to go to bed, and something just said, turn on the radio. That little radio. So I turn on the radio, and there's Roy. Truth coming out. It was like I knew that man had some truth. It was like, okay, you've been searching. And it resonated. I was like, whoa. I've never heard anybody talk about things like that. And he didn't even hardly say anything. But it was like, I knew that he knew something, right? And I think the first thing I heard was, there's a war going on inside every one of us. And I was like, yeah, that's true. So I started listening. At one point thought, okay, I have to get that meditation then. I have to get that meditation. That's it. So I got the meditation. And at that time in my life, I didn't have school. I didn't have anything. So I just really focused on that. I was working. But it was very difficult because all the thoughts and everything and that had been planted in my mind. But there was a breakthrough experience that I would say was the Holy Spirit or the light, whatever you want to call it, that freed me from some things. It's hard to even say. I'll say awakened me to my true self. And after that, I ended up going to college, and I still would meditate and stuff, but I never really had that kind of experience again. But it was a life-changing experience that sort of, like I've said before, sets your compass to true north. It sort of plants something in you. Of course, then my sister and I came to the ranch, and I met Alan, and we got married, had kids, and it was, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, because Alan was all over the place, and 4 kids, and lots of crazy things, but good, wonderful things. But along that path, there's also the path that's happening inside everyone. And one day, about 15 years ago, kids were at school, life was good, family was good, but I was walking around the house and I could still feel this doubt thing. I just became really aware of it, like hanging on me. And I was like, God, what is this? Why is this still here? I need to get rid of this. It's like been on me my whole life. And so I thought, I'm just going to go meditate, and boom, I'm going to just get to the bottom of this. Right? So I go in my closet and get quiet and purely ask and do the best I can to meditate, quiet and still, 15 minutes or so. Nothing happens. So I get up and I think, oh well, I guess I'm probably just going to have to live with this forever.
Did you expect something to happen?
Yeah, I did. I expected to find maybe an answer or some sort of solution or realization. For me, it was, I had a question, I identified something, and I was going to him. It's like, okay, what is this? I know it's not supposed to be on me. So, like I said, I walked away and was like, darn, oh well. But that night, I had a dream. In the dream, I was sitting in this place, which didn't feel like an earthly place, because I didn't see any walls or anything. It was just this ethereal type of place. And there was a light present, but the feeling in the dream was the thing that's hardest to explain. And I've heard others try to explain this. But it was pure love. It was sort of like a vibration that vibrated everything, the air, every cell of your body, the atmosphere. And it was going through me, and it was like very hard to explain, but it was the most amazing thing I'd ever experienced. Never experienced it on earth, okay? And I'm sitting there just full of God's love. That's what it was. But while I was sitting there, there was a little girl that I was watching out in front of me, and she was just beautiful. And for some reason, I was watching her life unfold. So it was like I was seeing her from conception until she became a little baby and started to walk. And I'm watching her, And the love I felt for her was also the same love. It was just, how do I find the words? Overflowing to the point there's no room for any darkness, nothing. And I'm watching this little girl start to go through her life, and she would like glance up at me, and as soon as she would look at me, I felt her love for me and my love for her. It was so consuming. And so I'm watching her just develop as a little innocent child. And then the thought came into my mind. The doubt was, what if she makes a mistake in her life? What if she makes a mistake? What was behind that question was, is this love still going to be there? And as soon as I had that thought, she stumbled. Yes.
Could it be you were watching yourself?
I'll get to that. So all I knew was that I'm having this experience, and she stumbled. And what do you think happened to the atmosphere and the love that was permeating everything?
Stronger.
Gone? Stronger? Anybody else guess? Okay.
It was still there.
Yeah. Nothing happened to it. It didn't waver even a tiny. And she stumbled again and again. It never wavered. So I woke up and I said, Alan, oh my gosh, I have to tell you this dream. At that moment, I said, I don't know if I'm going to have another child or what, but I told him the whole dream. And literally, I was still vibrating with that. I'm going to call it a feeling because I felt it. I know people don't like that word, but it was the best feeling I ever felt in my life. It was unconditional love. And I got up out of bed and I was still vibrating with that love. And Alan goes, Jan, that's you. And I'm like, well, I don't know how that could be me. I was watching her, I didn't get it. So I was so filled with love, I wrote a letter to my daughter about how much I loved her. Of course, at the middle of the day, the light bulb went off. And I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot that I sat down the day before asking God in that meditation, what is this? What is it? And so he didn't give it to me in the meditation. He gave it to me in a different way. He gives you answers in many different ways. And sometimes it's a dream. And this was more than a dream. There's no doubt in my mind. It was an experience. And so it hit me that he was letting me see myself through his eyes. Okay? He loves us so much. It's us that judges ourselves when we fall. And I'd often heard people, how can there be unconditional love? How can it be? Because if you do something wrong, all I can tell you is I experienced it. And once I experienced that, it planted again another something in me of knowing who I was. That I wasn't the person that I was made to think I was when I was little. I was his child. Once you know that, you can't ever take it away. You can never lose it. You can still stumble and fall a little bit, but you know the truth. The truth beyond all the lies that were told to you. You know the truth. And that really what this is all about is a father and his children. The whole life is about a father and his children. Adam and Eve were his children that fell away. We're all his children. But he loved us so much that he gave his prize son to suffer on our behalf. And that's a big deal. If you have a child, you can even just imagine, like Abraham was asked to sacrifice his child, right? But somehow, I think God knew that if the angels could fall and Satan could fall, he knew we would too. And that's why even before this earth and the time began, Jesus had already agreed to be the one to come down and sacrifice himself so that we could get back. So I share that because I know that many, many, many people carry around that doubt that they are worthy to be loved or worthy to be forgiven. And I know that that wasn't just me, that dream. It was a gift. But I know that there's a lot of people out there that probably need to hear that yes, you've stumbled, you've made mistakes, but your Father loves you. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I know that every person's life is a parable. Every single person. Their life is a story of falling, getting back up, lessons. Every person in this room, every person listening, has something, a lesson they could share, or something about their life that's a lesson to share that could help others.
This is what I've noticed about my life and other people, that what really screws you up is your culture. Even if you're raised in a very religious, if it's done in a forceful way, it's not going to take. And if it does take, it's just a veneer, it's just a cover. And I think that's what happens to people when they no longer go to a church that they feel is true. They're not telling the whole thing, that when we're brought up, we have an incredible pressures to conform. Extremes are like being a cannibal. You have no choice. I mean, they feed you, they comfort you, they house you, so you pretty much got to follow the line.
But did they love you?
Yeah, that's it. That's the part
That's really it.
Well, they love their culture more than they love bringing up the true person inside you. And I think that's what happens at some point in life where you say, is this it? Is this enough? And it's not enough. You have to have somewhere, something to draw on besides that.
I would agree that the truth can be given or taught without love. And we know when it's empty. You always think, well, if my parents would have done this or that, really it's about love, true ability to love in the proper way that delivers truth the best, obviously. But the truth is, even if we had perfect parents, we'd still stumble because look, Adam and Eve had the perfect parent and they still went for the wrong thing, right? So that means every one of us is kind of like Adam and Eve, I think God, for some reason, wanted us. Well, let me say this. When the angels fell, they don't have a way to get back. That's it. They're done, as far as I know. But he created man knowing he would fall, but he created a way back so that he could fall, experience sin and the emptiness of it, and go back and be reunited with him.
And long to go back.
And long to go back. Absolutely. Exactly. Being on this earth, being apart from that love that I experienced, being apart from it creates a longing for something we know is there somewhere. We talk about the garden a lot, a seed under the ground and the plants. What makes them grow? They're reaching for the sun. They're reaching for the light. That is what makes them grow. And there's something in all of us doing the same thing, reaching. Right?
I could relate to your story. For the longest time, I didn't feel like I deserved to really succeed in life, And it was an odd thing because I had the ability to succeed and I'd save money, and then repeatedly I'd keep on screwing it up, going back to and it's only not that, well, a little while ago that I realized, because when we were growing up, our dad wasn't there and my mom had a boyfriend, and he, we were in the way. We were just there and we were the bad people, we were messing up their situation. And so I resented him. I hated his, the evilness of it. So that got inside me. So I had this repetitive thing where that's where it came from. It was just that hostility that I got tricked into as a young boy, from his lack of love.
I read a little thing on the internet the other day. It said, be careful of the tone of voice and what you say to your children, because that becomes their inner voice. Isn't that the truth? That little voice is constantly, we're trying to get away from it, but it's still there.
Why do I feel like I don't deserve to succeed?
The message that you receive as a child, you are receiving a message because we are separate from God because of sin. Now we're going to get our value and who we are from our parents and our family and the people around us. So whatever messages they're giving you is what you take in.
They basically, whoever puts you down and gets inside of you owns you. And then you start looking to them for your approval, their approval. And that was my grandmother. She just constant belittling.
Okay, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah, and I don't think she could help herself because she hated my father so much. And she couldn't get at him because he was out of the picture. That I was there. I looked like my dad.
Got it. So that was the message you received. Yeah, and it's very difficult to shed that. Very difficult to shed it, even though you're not even aware of it, because it becomes just part of who you are. It's not even words anymore. It's like it happens so young, and then you're living your life, and you just have this thing on you, and you don't even know, even can forget where it came from.
Sure.
You know, it just becomes who you are. You think it is anyway.
Yeah, you carry the darkness with you, and you look at it as a when I do stuff as a kid, nobody ever showed me how to do anything. So everything I did was pretty poor, but it didn't stop me. I would just get out there. I loved being out in the yard, building things and stuff like that. So I'd continue doing it. I liked art. I liked to draw people's faces. I since quit that, but I got very good at it. I got to a point where I kind of reached my peak at drawing people's faces, and then all of a sudden when I was 20, I just stopped because I was expecting even more perfection. And I couldn't make a mistake, so that was about it, you know? It's just basically you get to a point where the things you like doing,
Isn't that sad?
it's sort of a thing you just you're blocked.
Isn't that sad?
Yeah.
You're given gifts,
Mm-hmm.
but that voice in you keeps telling you it's not good enough. And you're just going to get ridiculed for whatever you do anyway.
Or the next time you do it, you're not going to be as good, you know, sort of thing. It's just sort of like a lock.
Yeah.
You're locked into that. So it's sort of the things that you do are not really coming from you, you know, what I do is I keep trying and I succeed at little things. So, and some things take forever, but, you know, eventually you get there. I don't have the motivation I'd like, but it is, you know, sort of thing back in the back of my mind. I've never really quit.
Well, you're trying to succeed in spite of that
Yeah.
negative
Basically,
download. You're kind of having to,
It's the hardest thing for me to do is finish a project. There's always one little thing that I don't do and I put off. And then I go to the next project and start that project. It's easy to start a project. It's very hard to.
what is it about finishing it?
I have no clue.
Not sure.
I don't know.
Interesting.
It's something in me.
It won't be perfect.
Well, that was also related to my story too,
Yeah.
is that what if she makes a mistake, right? But that's what he showed me. It's not about perfection. It's about the lessons. It's about love. It's about the journey. And ultimately, when you know who you are in him, you don't have to prove to anyone else anything, even to yourself, that you're worthy, because your value comes from him. And I was going to say, you were talking about your grandmother. It actually wasn't your grandmother.
Yeah, I saw a picture of my great-grandmother. She's standing here. I've got the photograph at home, and it's very telling. It's got the three daughters, my grandmother, her sisters, and then my great-grandfather, and then my grandmother. My grandmother's sitting far to the right, and the daughters are standing kind of behind her. My grandfather's kind of off in the corner. And I looked at her hands and look on her face, and her fists are clenched, and she's got this look of rage in her. And it's just interesting photograph. I can study people's faces. Sure.
Yeah.
Passed down. And she was loved by everybody. It was just something that she kept under the surface. And I asked a friend about that. I said, why were the daughters so cold to their father? Well, their father was a contractor, and he was always working. So he wasn't there in their lives a lot. And so they grew up under the influence of their mother.
An angry one.
Yeah, yeah. But she, like probably kept it under the surface or whatever, but it passes down.
Yes, and that's what I was going to say is, if you think about it, all the cruelty that comes through is from the enemy.
Yeah.
Now, here's the question. Why does the enemy want us to feel this way? And why does the enemy want us to doubt God? You know why? Because not only that, he's mad. He got kicked out. He has no part of that anymore. So he wants you to think you're not getting any part of it either. You're not good enough. You're not going back there. He wants to ruin as many of God's kids as he can to get back at God, to punish him for doing what he has had to do.
But it serves a good purpose, right? It's kind of like the plan.
Yes, it's kind of interesting. Why is he trying so hard? He's mad at God, and he's trying to get back at God by getting at us, to not turn toward him, to not think he will love us, to not think we're able to reconnect with him.
God's presence is a funny thing, because at one minute it screams at you and the next minute it's silent as can be. And the screaming is only bringing you to reality. And that is a scream to the person who doesn't want to get there, and it takes a scream to get there. And for those who like the peace and silence, but not because they're escaping, they're just waiting for the next thing that comes in, that silence is not frustrating. It's not like, I gotta get this done. What God? We've gone through seeing that frustration, and we've gone beyond it. We didn't know we went beyond it. It's just we're okay having nothing to do or say. We don't know why. We just are. And then sometimes we see, because I didn't say anything, somebody else said something that needed to be said. And we didn't plan that. And if you plan it, then you're screwed up too, because it's the same thing again.
Speaking of screaming, it's probably not what you meant, but I went through several years of pretty deep depression because I was trying to run away from God. And I would spend long, long hours, even during the day, sleeping. That was my escape. I was able to do that. But at one point, I would sleep and then I'd wake up. It's like 11 or 12 noon, and I go back to sleep, and there was a siren in my head, was the loudest sound. And as soon as I opened my eyes, it went away. Then I went to try to go to sleep again. Whoa, like this blast. And then I opened my eyes, and it's gone. So, it was...
Funny. Screaming at you.
Yeah,
That's
literally.
funny. That's funny.
In your sleep.
He was making me not do it.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, I think since we know that the problems usually start in our family, of course, when you look at the Bible, you see that the whole story is about a broken family from the beginning, right? Kids that rebelled, a flawed mother, and a flawed father who both made excuses for why they did what they did. So none of us are going to get away without that experience in a family in some way. But that's the journey we're all on.
It's funny, not funny at all. In the Bible that Adam, how come they didn't go to him for advice, Cain and Abel? There's something was missing there. Has anybody ever noticed that?
It was jealousy.
It was jealousy, but why didn't he? How come Adam didn't notice this was going on?
That's a good question.
There's a lot that's not written too, so we don't.
Adam, you messed up.
I mean, why did you leave that out of the Bible, God? I wanted to know that answer.
I'm curious,
Your own family is Adam and Eve. The family you came from, the family you create, the family you pass on to the next generation. There's Adam and Eve repeated over and over, so that it's kind of nice to have the metaphorical, the nice symbolic story, and it's kind of neat because of the first generation, they're killing each other already. It may not have actually happened precisely like that, but the story is telling the message of how this passes on. And if you look at the Old Testament, it's all about passing down generation to generation, and even give a list of numbers of years and so on. it's not meant to take pride in your lineage, although most people do. They take pride in the lineage and all this. It's about this is passed down from generation. If you want to understand this story, look where you are right now, because it's repeating itself. And it's repeating itself in very unusual, ways that the Bible can't cover, because everyone's family is different. Everyone's formula is different in a sense, but it's all based on this, whatever this they're hinting at in the Bible, this relationship between the Father and his creation, Adam and Eve, and their generations that follow. And then there is a little story too with the salvation, but we see this, that's what I saw so much about Roy's. When I look back now, he always was talking about Adam and Eve. Always. And you say, well, why? What's wrong with this guy? We got beyond that. That's the beginning. But he's saying you're not beyond it yet. You're still stuck in this. There's a way out, but we're stuck in it.
Yes, very true. But you don't want to get stuck in Adam and Eve, because the answer is not in Adam and Eve. That's why the story continues with the way to get out of that cycle. So yes, it's all about the sin that was passed down, but then the promise that was also going to come through the lineage, right? So it was the sin passing down, and then the promise that was going to come to allow man to...
It was the people that believed in the Redeemer actually were able to enter heaven afterwards, even though he hadn't been there for centuries yet. They believed because of their belief.
So yeah, imagine being the first generation of people where you knew what happened and you knew they got kicked out and it was miserable, right? And so that the story that I believe it all actually happened that way. It gets passed down and they all, you would feel so hopeless.
He tried to kill himself. Adam tried to kill himself many times. He lived about 900 years old. And he finally kind of settled down after a while, and his kid, he wasn't doing that, but it was, he lived to 900 years, and his kids, Seth and all that, but their lives were, whatever was passed down didn't really stay, because in the Lost Books they talk about the children of Seth on the top of the mountain, the Book of Enoch and all that, and by the time before the great floods, there were very few people living up on the top of the mountain. Most of them went down to Cain because they couldn't convince these people that, this is a better life. They wanted the excitement. And so there was just a handful of people left.
Yeah, it must have been pretty depressing to know, So, but there was the glimmer of hope. This is what's going to happen, but I will send a Redeemer. And that's what they all kept looking toward. They kept looking toward. I always remember in the movie, The 10 Commandments, the one old guy who's stomping in the mud, and Moses comes by. This is another Redeemer, and he's like, I always prayed that I'd get to see the face of the Redeemer before I died. You remember? And so it's like in everyone's heart that there's just looking for that hope that there's a way out of this.
There's a book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning, and he talks about the inmates at the camps, and everybody had hope that they would be liberated. But the people that put the date on it, and that date went past, would die suddenly. Oh, wow. And the people that survived were the people that didn't put a date on it. They waited, and they came out.
So their hope never died.
Their hope never died.
Interesting. Does anybody else have anything they want to add, or anything they thought about during the week that...
Did you get ridiculed a lot as a child? Or?
Yes. I thought I mentioned it, but I may have skipped past it. Yes, and being that Mom and Dad weren't home a lot, and I was the middle child, I don't like to go into it too much, only because I don't want to incriminate my other family members who were just kids, and I love them to this day. But kids will be kids, and, teenagers can be cruel. And, when you're young and you just absorb it, or at least at some point I did. And I'm sure there's more to it, but it definitely affected, like I said, my whole idea of who I was and my value. So, yes.
Something you were talking about earlier, feelings of unworthiness. I know I get a lot of that, and I imagine a lot of other people here do too, from what I've been hearing. And I'm just wondering, do you think there's one experience that would take you past that? Because to me, it's a constant unfolding. And then at times falling back into a place where I feel like, oh, there's no hope. But it seems like it's just not going to happen instantly, I'll put it that way.
When you have a real experience with something, it's different than like maybe if you read it and you go, yeah, that's really great. But when you actually feel it, and honestly, even if I make a mistake, no, nothing can take that away, ever. Because it's a knowing beyond knowing that nobody could ever talk me out of.
In my case, I've got quite a past. I got in a lot of trouble. So I carry memories of things I've done. And when they resurface, sometimes I think, oh, God, if there's a judgment day, how will I answer for these things? I can see that I was set up as a kid, not that my parents ever meant to hurt me, but I can see some of the principles involved in why I became what I have. But I'm just kind of curious about it because I do go through periods. I have to admit, I do go through periods where these things resurface, and I think it's hopeless. And then I snap out of it, and I think, no, it's not hopeless. Yeah. Just falling into that dark mode of thinking again. So
we have the blessing of this. I call it silent prayer. So if you need the discipline to do that too, because the evil is like a lion every day. It's trying to penetrate and use your intellect. So for me, I probably would be dead without it. Very likely. Because I was close to suicide, but it's a daily thing. So, I know you've had difficulty with that, but, you can only do so much thinking, so much reasoning, and then you got to step out, if you want to go to the next level.
I remember years ago I told Roy that I had problems meditating, sitting still, and Roy goes, well, that's because you're guilty. And I thought, well, I kind of get that part already, but it's like, how do you get past that? To me, it just happened. Sometimes I'll just be doing my work, and just little trickles of understanding come in, and I feel like maybe it's not so bad. Just sometimes working with my hands, I feel like I get more than sitting there quietly trying to find this inner light that's going to,
I don't know if this will help you. I work with my hands a lot, but it can be an escape just as well as it can be helpful. When you're working with your hands and you're doing something, even if you're doing something you've never done before, are you watching your hands work? Are you watching your hands work? Or are you making your hands work? Because I found I will have a problem. Yesterday I built something, and I laid down to meditate, and with nothing to do, and at some point I got up, had this idea, and I like to have things make themselves. So I say, well, I need this done, and what have I got? So I look around and see what I got, and turns out I had something that, maybe that's it. So then I made this whole thing out of this idea. But I didn't make it because the parts didn't fit. The wood wasn't long enough, so I had to change the design, and I had this over here, but this wasn't big enough, and this. So I'm working through this whole process, watching myself work. And today I went out to look at what I had built, and I watched myself look at what I had built. You know how you look at what you did later and say, that looks pretty good. See? And I'm watching myself watch. Because I am a human being, and I have a mind and an ego and a pride and this whole nature that we inherited from our father Adam. I have that. So I don't expect it to be taken away. All God wants us to do is find this place where we're watching ourselves be ourselves, not in control of it. Because we realize at some point, so I used to be a teacher of kids, and someone asked me recently if I wanted to help teach something to kids, and I said, well, I really don't like to teach kids. I like kids, but kids haven't suffered enough that they can learn what they need to learn yet. Well, that's strange. Isn't that cruel? Kids haven't suffered enough because they'll learn so much, but they won't learn deeply what I want to teach about life, what I've learned about life. They haven't suffered enough. And we just listened to a video of Roy that he did a couple of years ago, and he talks about the value of suffering, that you have to realize the value of suffering. And it's not going through the suffering and gritting your teeth. It's going through the suffering and finding this other way where you watch yourself suffering. You watch yourself failing. You watch yourself achieving. You watch yourself taking pride in your achievements. You watch yourself, but at some point, as you begin to do this little by little, you will realize It's not me watching. I can't do it myself. Myself cannot watch myself because it's not the same thing. And what I realized at some point was it was his presence in me that allows me to watch. And then when he's not, his presence isn't felt, I can't watch. I'm just caught in myself, and I just watch myself walking around being myself. There's a magic there, and that's why you should never give up hope, because he's taking you through this so that you're the chemistry of what you as an individual person with a whole lifetime of experiences needs a certain path to follow to come to this delicate place where we can watch with his eyes. And we don't feel like God at all. We feel helpless. But when you're watching with his eyes, you see your helplessness and you're not angry.
Well, it's interesting to me that some days I get past it where I feel like, I just got sucked into a dark mode of thinking, and this isn't necessarily true. And something will snap me out of it. If stress gets the best of me, I start having a lot of those dark thoughts. It's almost like I'm separated from a higher realm where forgiveness seems like it's possible.
Seeing that, in the moment, seeing that stress has separated you, that's the moment of truth. Mm-hmm. Don't let that die. That moment when you see your helplessness and hopelessness and you're watching it, you cannot watch it from a hopeless place. You've got to realize that seeing is not something to be afraid of. It's a blessing.
Perhaps in the seeing, maybe you're unconsciously adding your own judgment to yourself. Can you let go of passing a judgment on yourself?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay, that's really it. It's so tempting to judge others and to even judge ourselves. Because if we're judging, we're a judge. We're not supposed to be the judge.
True.
Right?
That's true. Good point.
I'll just make a quick point, Chuck, about teaching children. The thing that I find is that the innocence in children is so, so beautiful. And the value in being a teacher of children is if you appreciate that innocence in that child. Yes, maybe they haven't suffered enough, but if you have love, there's moments where you plant seeds, little seeds of truth with love that they remember and they grow, because everybody else is planting weeds. Many people are planting the weeds. We need people who are planting seeds of love and truth in the children. They flower later. How many people say, I had this one teacher that was so kind to me and they really knew how I could learn well, and so every little thing makes a difference. Trying to figure out how to close this up. I'm not a public speaker person, people. That's not my thing. I'd rather write. I like to write. So honestly, the other reason I chose to do this today was because I didn't want to. I had to make myself uncomfortable, and I thought, you know what? If I want to be closer to my Father in heaven, what am I willing to give up? Am I willing to be uncomfortable? So I said yes, and it was uncomfortable, but I did it anyway.
They say half the battle is showing up.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's also tied to that little. Many people have a fear of public speaking. Okay? And it is tied usually to some sort of ridicule that they had in their life. And so that was also under there. Not that any of you would ridicule me, but it's this trauma point that I thought, this is a good opportunity to just walk past it, go past it. So that's why I'm here today. So I'm going to close this up, and thank you all for coming and adding what you had to say today. Thank you for the listeners out there that support the foundation, and thank you very much.